Let's talk about interactions. Interactions are one of the most fundamental differences between real-time visual systems, such as Cables, and other digital creation tools such as Blender, After Effects, Houdini, Cinema 4D, and so forth. The fact that we can, in real time, play with the visual adds a completely new, different dimension to the projects. So in this video, we're gonna see simple ways of interacting with our patch. I'm gonna also explain the use of sidebar and variables. And as you will progress in your knowledge of cables, you will be able to add more and more ways of interacting with your patch because, to be honest, sky is the limit here. So to prove what I'm saying, let's go and open this new patch that I've created. First thing we know, by now we should be very familiar with this. And just to be clear, I want to also go back. When I press the tab key, you see that I opened this very big search box basically, and I always seem to know what I'm looking for because I know cables very well. But if you're not really sure which namespace or where the ops are located, on the right hand side you will see you have like all the sub folders, if you will, where you have all the ops that you may need. So main loop, I'm not even sure there's a main loop folder. It's in the GL framework. You can always see that because there's ops dot, the namespace, and the rest. But let's say if I want to focus on one particular arrays, for instance, instead of typing arrays, I can always go here and click on the arrays and have the list of all the ops under the namespace arrays. So I wanted to just start with this if it was not very clear so far. But so, if you want to interact, there are many ways. We can think of, for like, just out of my head, keyboard, mouse, camera, audio. It could be some hardware devices. For instance, I could use, I don't know, the accelerometer from my phone to control some patch. It could be the weather outside, the temperature, lasers. Anything is possible as long as you can transform whatever input you have into some variables that we can use to trigger or modify the input values of ports. Then we can interact with the world. So the first thing I would like to talk about is the sidebar. What is the sidebar? If you want to debug and do something visuals, it would be very handy to have some kind of a UI, like a user interface for us to be able to play with our patch. And so far, we've been interacting directly in the editor, but not really in the viewport. So let's demonstrate with a really simple example. I'm gonna make a clear color. This, as you know, is just to change the background color. But now, if I want to change it, I click on the clear color and I go here and I use this UI. But it doesn't give me any options for the user to change the color. If I save my patch and I open it in view patch page in a new window, well, now my patch is red and there's nothing I can do to change the color. So the first type of interaction I would like to give my users is for them to be able to change the color of the background, for instance. Very simple, right? So the way to do this, we understand that, okay, we need some kind of inputs to be able to change these values here. And as I mentioned before, the sidebar will be our friend. So how does it work? It's pretty simple. We have this very root op that we call sidebar, and any widget that exists in Cables needs to be a child of this sidebar. So the first thing I would like to do, if I want to, for instance, change the colors, there is a handy op already made for us, and it's called, if I don't even know what it's called, I can once again just open the sidebar and see all the ops starting with sidebar. But in my case here, I know that it's going to be called color picker. So if I search for color picker, I should be able and see that this one, okay, color picker is still in the sidebar namespace. Pretty good. And once again, if it's not connected, it doesn't do anything. It has to be a child of sidebar. I connect it here and I notice, okay, I have a color picker. I can specify the text here and call this, background color. And I notice that This sidebar gives me, so you can actually specify the input yourselves or get what the user will select here, and in the output like get back the red, green and blue channel. So the first thing I would like to do is to just connect red, green and blue, and now I'm saving my patch. Now the way I can change the background color from the UI. So if I go back here, reload the page, now my user has the choice of actually changing the background color. So this is a fundamental difference between us editors, creator of the patch, and giving the choice to your users. So let the user interact with the patch. Okay, very simple example, but you will see, you start to get the hang of the sidebar. Now let's say that I want to, I don't know, create a small circle that will also change colors and maybe follow the mouse, right? So, okay, I'm talking about changing the color of something and following the mouse. So I will also like to have some kind of a mouse input. So if I type mouse, you have some basically alternate version of the mouse, but the one we want most likely is this one. It's just a simple mouse up, and it gives you, so this is really important. First, it gives you, let's just talk about the output. You have X and Y, the position, whether you click left or click right, and also if you are holding a button and if you are hovering over something. Now, notice that the X and Y coordinates needs to be dependent on basically the coordinate space. Are we talking about pixels, something that I see on the screen, or are we talking about coordinates in my 3D scene, right? So, or normalize between -1 and 1 or 0 to 1. So this is an option that is given to you by the up here, and also the area, where are you capturing my mouse? So look, check it out. If I move my mouse in my editor, nothing moved here. If I move my mouse in the viewport, this updates. But now because I said everything, I'm only capturing the mouse in the canvas area. I could also say, I want this in the parent element. So you will not see the difference, but this changes if you have some kind of HTML overlay. So if you have the background here and some kind of HTML, you see here, this is not WebGL, this is an HTML element, but it's still being captured. If I do this, canvas again, and now I'm hovering in the sidebar, you see that the X and Y coordinates are not moving anymore. So the area is really important depending on if you have many widgets or not. Then I can say the document itself. So here, even if I'm in the editor, the mouse is still captured anywhere in the page, on the whole document, which is the whole web page. So in 99% of all cases, you would use either canvas or the parent element. And we have our mouse here. Now, how do we have our mouse? We say it would be nice if we could move the circle below the mouse. So we know how to make a circle, just a simple circle. And we know that to move a circle, we need a transform. This is, if you're not sure, see previous lessons. So we have a circle now. Okay, I didn't put any material yet, it doesn't matter. What matters is if I move this, then my circle needs to, should follow. So of course my mouse is in 2D space, so it's only X and Y, and there's no Z. But now notice that, okay, it's not perfect because it seems to bounce because I'm basically overshooting the bounds here, but my circle is more or less following my mouse. Wow. So of course I can decide to, if I change the size of the canvas, you see it's also a bit dependent on how you move things around. You can decide to change the coordinate space. You can decide to move the camera. Something that I would like to show you is that we can also play with I first activate and deactivate the mouse. It's pretty handy if you don't want the interactions to start already. And you need some kind of trigger or event to make it active. But another thing that is actually very common with mouse is that instead of reasoning into -1 to 1 or 0 to 1, you actually keep this as the original pixel values. So between 0 and the total width of the canvas, for instance. So if I put here, let me just print the values so we see this clearly. This is my X and Y. Now, if I click on mouse and I put it into pixel, now, okay, I'm overshooting. Like you see, I'm putting on the bottom left, and I'm supposed to be like 0, 0 exactly, right? The square. Pixel display is a bit of the same. It depends also on the density, if you have a retina display or not. But here, you see, I'm trying to move everything, and because this is in pixel coordinate, of course the transform is completely crazy now, because it's, imagine this is 1 meter, now I'm moving 400 meters to the left and 234 meters up, which is not what we want. So the way to transform the space so that everything that is below now is in pixels and not in the normalized coordinate space is to use an op called pixel projection. And it says here, remaps, I put it there, remaps the coordinate system to a pixel coordinate system from the word, which is a 3D word. So now everything that is below is in pixels. So even the size of my circle is 0.5 pixel of a radius. So it's very, very small. I should put 100 pixels. And you see now that it's actually reacts much better, because it's always match the resolution. There is no remapping being done, and it's a different coordinate system. When I play with the mouse and I keep it, or any kind of UI that I keep in front of the screen, I always use this pixel projections. If I want to do something in 3D, I use the regular word coordinate. And the two can definitely coexist at the same time, because as I said, this is what happens below this trigger line, basically. So the rest, if I go and put a sequence here and I create another line, it's not affected by the pixel projection. So I could say, now I'm gonna put this on the left, on the right, and here on the left, I'm gonna create a simple cube, right? And now the two of them are different, existing, if you will, in two different coordinate system. So if I go and, as always, I put orbit controls to move my cube, you will notice that I can actually move my mouse and rotate my cube. What is missing is this small material to show it a bit better, right? So here, it doesn't really matter. I can actually have something that is always on the side here, in front of the screen, and at the background, my regular 3D scene. So I hope this was a clear explanation about how you can mix different coordinate system. It's very handy, and it's quite simple if you think about it. Everything that is below pixel projection will be in pixels, so the numbers need to be much bigger than what we have when we use the regular 3D coordinate system. So now that we have introduced our simple circle following our mouse, what we could do is that maybe when we click on the screen, something happens, right? Because now we are interacting, but we are just moving a circle, but we're actually not interacting with the patch itself. So what could we imagine with this? First, let's say that I want to change the size of my circle. What I could do is to add another control here on the sidebar to let the user choose like the radius of my circle, for instance. So let's create a new type of widget, and this one is called slider, because I just want to have a simple slider that users can move. And so I know my slider, we're gonna call this, I don't know, circle radius. And I know, okay, I know it's gonna be in pixels, so I said the minimum value is 10, the maximum value is 100. The steps are very small, so it's gonna be very smooth. It doesn't matter here because it can be smooth. My default input, this is important. By default, if you load the patch, you see it's 0.5. But now 0.5 is outside the bounds of our min and max. So what would you like to have as a default value? Let's say 50, and then I'm gonna click set default. Okay, now when I move this, notice that the UI is updating. But of course I need to connect this value to my circle here radius. So I'm here, I'm moving my circle size, and I make a bigger or smaller circle. Pretty cool. Now, the issue with this, it's not an issue, but if you notice that a good technique is actually to create a line of sidebar ops. And if you have a bigger patch, you would see that the cables are really crossing the screen. It's very common, and especially if you do sidebar ops. And there is a way, I told you before, that we can actually cut some cables. You don't want to cut all the cables, otherwise it will not be cables, but I don't know, variables, the name of the program. But sometimes it's very handy to make clean distinction between sidebars or different areas of your patch. So I would like to show you how to create now to cut a cable and basically create a variable. So let's say that this cable here annoys me because it crosses the screen and I don't like it. So the simple way is this: you just drag, and here on the right there is this in the UI, create variable. How are we going to name it? We're going to name it circle radius. And automatically the editor has created two ops for us. One, it's called var set number, and you notice that it's below the namespace var, so you have var set number, var set string, bool, all the data type that we have in cables. So basically it says, hey, send the value to this guy here, and of course on the other side you have var get number, and now I'm getting, okay, there's only one variable, and when I'm setting this name. So I can create as many variables as I want, and on the other side, I'm just getting back with the right name. So here I'm gonna get, okay, var get circle radius. I'm gonna connect it here, and I'm gonna delete this cable. I'm gonna save my patch, and I notice that if I organize this, my circle radius works, and I don't have any cables anymore, right? So I've basically cut and separated some of the. I can do this again for the three here: red, green, blue. I think it really depends on the style. It doesn't really matter here because it's usually the clear color is at the top level of the sidebar. But if you have a very long chain of sidebar, this is going to matter. So so this is for variables, but there is another op. Let's say that I now want to trigger something and send it back in a variable and get it back. It's not called var set number. This one is a bit different, but it's exactly the same principle. So let's say that I want to reset my orbit control, right? You remember that we always have a reset button. So let's I'm with my cube here, and I want to reset back to the beginning, right? Or I want to unzoom going back. So I know that I need to be able to trigger this button. So let's imagine now I'm going to create in my sidebar a button. And the same, I'm going to call this reset. And so, okay, now what I have is the trigger. If I click on reset, this guy is going to be activated. So once again, I do the same technique. I'm dragging out the cable, letting it go, and see now a variable send into a trigger send, which is the equivalent of the var set something, but for a trigger. Trigger send. Now I need to name it here. So I'm gonna create a new one, and I'm gonna call it reset. So good practice. Don't you capitalize your variables. Use this, what we call the camel case, so that the first thing is always in lowercase, and then when you want to start if you have a complex sentence, a complex variable name, first is in lowercase, and then at the new word you start with the capital letter. So circle radius, it could be a reset patch. In our case here, reset is okay. So this is something that we learn from programming. So when we reach the JavaScript part of the lessons, you will see that we use this kind of conventions. It's a purely convention. It doesn't make any. You could write this however you want, but it also quickly you see the difference between variables in your patch and all the ops, which are always starting with the capital letter. So yeah, it's just a convention. So if I go back here, when I click my reset button, now it goes to this reset That's pretty cool, but I need now to get it back to actually trigger my reset from my orbit controls, for instance. So here I have a trigger send, and the opposite is the trigger receive. With 2 R's, yes, this one. I put it down and say, hey, unknown trigger, because I need to, okay, which one do you want to take? I want to take the one that is called reset. Now you see it changes the name. I connect it there, saving the patch. Now I'm moving around, clicking on the reset button, and we go back to the beginning. These 2 techniques, the var get and set and the trigger send, trigger receive, we can really organize our patch neatly. Another example, like reset is particularly handy. Let's say that I want to go back to I'm moving my circle radius and I want to go back to the default value. I can just simply connect my reset here. And notice that I don't need to draw cables anywhere, just to use the same variable that I'm getting from this one here. So when I click, it resets to the middle point, which is pretty handy. So, okay. Now, what else could we do with our circle or with our patch? If we talk back and think about interactions, something that is very classic would be to use the keyboard, right? We have the mouse, we have the keyboard, we have the circle. So because now our circle is bound to our mouse, maybe we could use the keyboard to move our cube. A bit like a video game character, right? I want to press some controls and make my cube move, I don't know, left or right, for instance. And this we know that, I think we have an idea of how to do this. But to be perfectly clear, I will try to explain in all the details. So we know that if we want to move a cube, we need to use a transform. This is nothing really new. So this part is okay. Now, something that we didn't cover yet is how to capture a keyboard input. Very simple. There is an op called key press learn. Because if you don't know, so on the computer, all the keys have basically an ASCII character, which is basically a number between 0 and 128, and more if you have Unicode, but just let's say a simple keyboard. And you have a key code per basically key. So I don't know what is the keyboard for the key value for key code for A. So what I'm gonna do here is a key press learn. Press the learn button, type A, and then I know that okay, the key code for A is 65. If I want this to be Shift A or Control A, I can use the Alt A, well, in this case only Alt, but you could imagine Shift and other basically modifier keys. I would be here. So I'm only capturing the keyboard when I'm in the canvas, not here, unless I'm pressing learn, basically to capture the key. So now that I've captured my A key, the output tells me, okay, this is being pressed only on the canvas, and I'm gonna be able to capture the state of this key to move. So think about it. How would you move a cube? We have a position, which is by default 0. And I would like to say that each time that I'm pressing this key, and let's imagine that we are like a video game. A would be to go to the left, and D would be to go to the right. So I'm copying, pasting, learning, pressing D, and now I have my left and right buttons, right? What I could say is that, okay, I'm gonna count how many times I'm pressing the key, and I'm gonna add a small value each time to move my cube from a small delta to the left or to the right, for instance. So, of course, as always, there's an op for that. So the one we are looking for is called add up. And it's very simple. The 3 inputs, it says, okay, what number do you want to add? So of course, if we add 1 meter every time, it's too big, right? We could say 0.1 for now. There is the add button and the reset button. And we go back again to having a reset button is gonna be very handy. I'm gonna connect it already, because if I want to reset, I want my cube to go back to the beginning. So if I press, I would use the press or on release. It's a bit different. Press is when you are really still on the key, it's triggered. Release is when you move your hand from the key. But let's say on press, I want to add up 0.1. So this is a value 0, right? Each time I'm pressing here A, it counts. If I reset, it goes back to 0. Very simple, right? I can do the same thing for the D key, so I can really copy and paste this up, connect the reset as well. I'm gonna add the same delta. You could also, this is where we could specify basically the pace of our cube. So we could say we can make a variable here. Why not? And choose how big the jump we want, how big the jump is basically. So instead of making a slider here, I mean, the slider is actually, I like the sliders because it's very handy to change the values, and you can also, as I said, type the value here directly. But it has to be a different slider. So I'm gonna copy, paste my slider, put it below, call it, step. The step is gonna be between 0.1 and 1, let's say. My default value is gonna be 0.1, right? And I'm gonna use this step, create here a variable, step, getting it back. See, I'm going faster. It's the same thing we saw, right? But just to show you what like the optimal speed would be when you have a bit more experience. I'm getting the step here, and notice how I'm also aligning my ops so that they are very neatly organized, right? I'm not doing this. This is really ugly, and you cannot really see anything. So the technique, and I mentioned this before, is to use the angle cables, the straight cables. And if you go here, my editor preference, and you go back to change to straight cables, so that you can line them up neatly like this, right? So I think it's a bit better visually to understand, because it's exactly the same ops, right? So, okay, I have my add up. Now, one is going to be on one direction and one should be on the other direction, because in our case here, both are adding stuff. So if I press here A or D, they are counting positively. So what we want is one to count in the negative side, right? So I could say if I multiply this by -1, I'm reversing effectively the direction. So I have one that counts here on one side, one on the other side. Now if I add them up, right, I'm gonna just press plus. I have basically the overall displacement, right? It's a combination of left and right keys. There are many ways to do this. I'm just trying to do it, I don't know, one version. Okay, now this is my my step here. And so you could, there are different techniques, as I said. So either you change the step, you could also here multiply by another factor. You could say I'm always adding a very small step, 0.1, but here I'm changing the speed by multiplying the result by whatever. It's the same thing. It's just a way to change how fast. So let's put this to 1 for now. Are we gonna move left or right? So now I'm just visualizing the outcome. So I'm removing these ones. So okay, if I'm pressing this here, but if I change my step, you see I'm changing the speed differently. To be honest, I don't think this is actually a good solution. It's better to keep a small step and multiply it after, I would say. So let's try to do this instead. Just multiply it's not step, it would be speed, but I think it's a bit better to, so let's just rename this speed here. And by the way, if you want to rename a variable, this is a good example. I don't like step anymore. I want to call it speed. I'll go here, rename speed, and you see automatically all like the variable change the name by itself. So you don't have to change anything. When you set a variable, you can rename it and it will be renamed in all the patch. So okay, I have my speed, my values. Okay, now, well, I need to transform my cube. So I can go here, take this value, use position X, because X and Y are the same. And now if I press stuff, I can unzoom. And notice that my cube now is reacting to how I move. If I move the speed, it will go faster, right? So we kind of have a video game. The issue we have here is that if I press, you see that it's not very smooth, right? You can really see the thing jumping. So there is an op, it's very handy op in Cables that you would use very, like in a lot of cases, if you want to make animations. We'll also, I want to introduce it here, but we'll talk more about it when we talk about animations. It's called a smooth op, which is a simple op that takes a value and basically multiplies it over time to make it smoother. So this is, you have three inputs: the value and the factor of how much you want it to smooth the value. You can, if you press here, you have one factor to when you increment the value and one factor when you decrement, but otherwise by default it's in both directions. So I'm just gonna now replace this and disconnect the outcome, the output of the one. So now I'm putting this value, I'm putting into a smooth value. I have this factor, and you notice when I click here, it takes a bit of time to reach equilibrium. But notice now, if I move it and put more and more factors, it's going to be much smoother, and it will not basically jump as we had before. It also gives a feeling of having some kind of physics, because it continues a bit after I release the key. Right, it's like kind of bouncing on the wall, and it continues go back, and it doesn't go back, to be honest, but it continues in the same direction. So it's not like bouncing on the wall. Sorry. If you want to bounce something on the wall, you need to introduce physics, which is another kind of a realm that we have in Cables as well. So here I have smooth, controls, and I still have my mouse that is on the 2D basically plane on top of it. So I think it's pretty cool. Already we start to have cool interactions. I hope that you can think of many use cases for this. We saw the keyboard and we saw some kind of mouse interaction. We also introduced the sidebar, and something that, just for you guys, a new thing that we could add to the mix would be maybe to use the microphone, because in our project we will use some audio components. And one that is very handy could be the microphone. So to finish this part of the lesson, I would like to introduce yet another way to interact with your patch by using your voice, for instance. So my idea here is to basically make the cube move up and down by the sound of my voice, just by the volume, basically. So how do we do this? Well, the first thing we need to do is to introduce some kind of a microphone value, right? So I'm checking, look, I'm cleaning a bit the patch. I'm creating a new branch here, and I want to introduce first, before I create this, we need something that maybe didn't know. When you go on the website, now by default, all the browsers tells you whether you want to activate sound or not. If you don't do this, actually the sound by default is muted, because there are so many people spamming. The worst experience in the world is when you open a website and it starts to shout, blast some music or ads or anything. So to protect users against this, we have to ask for consent. And Cables integrate this clearly with the play button. And you notice that you need to click on this button to tell the browser, okay, the user told me it was okay to play or record or whatever, some microphone or music. So the first thing we need to do is this play button, and you can trigger it simply. You can trigger it by like automatically. So when you go back and if the website is basically approved as safe, you can always you basically need to skip over the play button. For now, we can just each time ask the users to click on the play button if they want to activate the sound. And when this is triggered, so here, click triggered, then we can now put our microphone, which is called microphone in. And by default, they will ask you which microphone. So I have many, as you can see, but let's say I'm going to use this webcam. You want to use. And let's save the patch, just reload, and normally the warning should go away. You see? So my microphone here is not listening, but if I play the button, now okay. Now I'm listening to some microphone inputs. And what I need is to, of course, get back the values. Here in the output, I have the list of available microphones and this audio node that we're gonna use to analyze the sound. And the op that we need is called simply audio analyzer. And this one to work needs to be connected to the main loop, so to a trigger basically. So now I've connected there, and so I have many options here. It's not, we can maybe cover this in the future lessons. This is about all the, what is a fast Fourier transform, the range. This is actually music stuff. It's like signal processing, to be perfectly correct. But what we are really interested in here is this. Look, the average volume or the RMS, like root mean square volume, doesn't really matter, to be honest. Just it's a measure of the how loud the sound is. So if I stop talking, it should go it's the power spectrum actually of the sound. If I use my average volume and I stop talking, it's very low, right? And you can actually see here, if I don't want to scream, but if I were to scream, you would see a very high value here. It's always bounded between 0. I think maximum is not even 1. So we will need to basically take this value here and map it to maybe a transform, so that we move our cube up and down here according to the sound. So simply I'm going to click on my audio analyzer, take the average volume, create a variable here, call this volume. So I don't need to draw a very big cable. I'm getting back my volume here. And once again, the volume is also, it moves very, it's not very smooth. So I could also imagine using a smooth up. But first, what I need to do is to remap the value, right? Because this is a value between 0 and, at my voice level here, 0.3, let's say. And I want my cube to move up and down between, I don't know, let's say minus 0.5 and 5. So old min 0, old max 0.3, new min 0.5 and to 0.5 for now, right? So this is how I map my thing. I could even put my easing curve here to make the line smoother. Let's try it like this. And then if it doesn't work, if it's not smooth enough, we can add the smooth value. Okay. So now you see, as I talk, the cube is moving up and down, but it's not very, very smooth. It's jittering way too much. So I'm gonna go back here, put this on linear, and as we did before, add another smooth up, right? So I'm gonna put this after and connect my smooth here and put it there. Notice how smooth now the cube is. And if I want to change more or less smooth, I can just change the factor here. If I put 2, it was gonna go back to the jittery stuff. I put 24, and now it should be very, very smooth. Slower, of course, but also much cooler on the eyes. If I want to change the color of my cube, I need to do a material. So I'm gonna use the basic material, and I need to connect this. So I can use the double click here, and the way to create new random variables on trigger is called trigger random number here. And it tells you, okay, what is the value? Okay, but we know that it's between 0 and 1 for colors, but we can also specify that it's always gonna have some kind of a default red value, so that it has to be a minimum of 0.3 red, for instance. We know that we want the output to be not an integer, but a real floating point value, and then taking back this this value and connect it here to the red value, for instance. And the funny thing is, if you double click this trigger only once, right? So I can use the trigger and chain it so that it triggers 1, 2, and basically again make the whole chain with just a one double click. So green, and then here I need to set back the original values between 0 and 1. And here, for instance, it was okay, always the last value, or always the blue value, for instance, here. So it doesn't mean something to trigger a value that is between 1 and 1. It's always 1, right? So you could say set this to 1, but for the purpose of our exercise, let's say between 0.8 and 1. So I'm saving my patch. If I double click, notice that my circle now changes color. So we use the mouse double click, or it could be click, right? If you want, now we can just simply move this here. And each time I click now, I'm changing the color, and everything is a bit tied up. So I think we've covered not everything for sure. This is just a simple way of interacting, but I hope that it gives you ideas and perspective. The visuals here are not very impressive, but think of it, this could be for anything, right? So as you progress in your cables mastery, you will use all of these techniques together, and we will see that when we reach the project to create something that is actually impressive. So I hope you like this lesson, and I'll see you in the next one.